Captain Sarah had been commanding deep space listening posts for 15 years, but she had never heard anything quite like this. The signal came through at 3:47 hours, cutting through the cosmic background radiation like a knife through silk. What made it remarkable wasn't just its clarity. It was the fact that it was clearly artificial, and it definitely wasn't human. "Martinez, are you seeing this?" She called to her communications officer, her voice tight with controlled excitement. Lieutenant Carlos Martinez looked up from his console, his dark eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain, I've run it through every filter we have. This signal is definitely not from any Earth-based source. The mathematical progression is too complex, too alien." The station hung in the darkness between Mars and Jupiter, a spinning wheel of metal and composite materials that served as humanity's most advanced deep space monitoring facility. For decades, it had been listening to the cosmos, hopping for exactly this moment. Now that it had arrived, nobody quite knew what to do with it. Moved to Martinez's station, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal deck plating. The signal displayed on his screen as a series of complex waveforms, pulsing in patterns that seemed almost musical. But beneath the beauty lay something that made her stomach clench with worry. "There's something else, Captain," Martinez said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "The signal! It's not just a greeting. Our translation algorithms are picking up distress indicators, mathematical concepts that suggest urgency, maybe even panic." Felt the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. Humanity had spent decades preparing for first contact, building protocols and procedures, training diplomats and linguists. But nobody had prepared them for an alien species in distress. "How long have you been tracking it?" she asked. 3 hours now. The signal is definitely moving, getting closer. Whatever is sending this, it's heading directly for our solar system. The implications hit like a physical blow. An alien spacecraft, possibly damaged, possibly carrying refugees, was approaching Earth. And they were asking for help using mathematics so advanced that their computers could barely translate it. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," she ordered. "Priority Alpha." While Martinez worked to establish the connection, studied the alien signal. The mathematical patterns were beautiful in their complexity, geometric progressions that seemed to dance with prime numbers, creating harmonies that no human mind could have conceived. But woven through the mathematical poetry were clear indicators of distress, repeating sequences that their computers flagged as emergency protocols, urgent requests for assistance. "Earth Command online, Captain," Martinez announced. Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared on the main screen, her gray hair pulled back in its characteristic tight bun. Harrison had been preparing for this moment her entire career, but even she looked shaken. "Captain, we're receiving your telemetry. Are you certain this is genuine?" "As certain as I can be, Admiral. The signal shows no signs of human origin. The mathematical complexity is beyond anything we could generate, and the approach vector suggests the source originated from outside our solar system entirely." Harrison was quiet for a long moment and could see her weighing impossible decisions. "What's your assessment of their intentions?" "Based on our limited translation, they appear to be in distress. This isn't an invasion fleet. It's a desperate call for help. The signal contains what our computers interpret as refugees, damaged systems, and urgent need for sanctuary." "How long until they reach us?" Martinez looked up from his calculations. "Based on their current trajectory and deceleration pattern, approximately 72 hours until they enter Earth's orbital space." Harrison nodded grimly. "Captain, I'm authorizing you to attempt direct communication. Use any means necessary, but remember, you may be speaking the first words between our species. Choose them carefully." The connection ended, leaving alone with the weight of history. She turned to her communications officer. "Martinez, can we modulate our response to match their mathematical framework?" "I think so, Captain, but what do we say?" Consider this carefully. Humanity's first words to an alien species couldn't be a simple greeting, not when they were clearly in distress. They needed to communicate compassion, intelligence, and capability. "Start with prime numbers," she said finally. "Show them we understand mathematics. Then use the emergency response protocols they've been sending. Mirror their distress signals, but modify them to indicate that we receive and acknowledge their request for help." Martinez worked for 30 minutes, crafting humanity's first intentional message to an alien species. When he finally looked up, his hands were shaking slightly. "Ready, Captain. Send it." The response came back within minutes, and it nearly overwhelmed their receiving equipment. The alien signal suddenly became far more complex, carrying what their computers interpreted as massive amounts of data. Star charts, technical specifications, and what appeared to be desperate explanations of their situation. Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne, the stations, had been working frantically to understand the incoming data. She rushed into the command center, her usually neat appearance disheveled from hours of intense work. "Captain, I've managed to decode portions of their message. They call themselves and they're refugees. There was destroyed by something they call the Devourers, a machine intelligence that consumes entire star systems." Felt her blood run cold. How many survivors? Approximately 50,000 individuals aboard a massive generation ship. But their vessel is critically damaged. Life support is failing, and they estimate they have less than a week before catastrophic system failure. "What about these Devourers?" Hawthorne's expression grew even more grim. "According to their data, the Devourers follow refugee fleets. They use them as bait to find new systems to consume. Captain, by helping we might be painting a target on Earth itself." The command center fell silent except for the soft hum of life support systems. Realized that humanity's first contact with alien life had instantly become its most dangerous decision. Save 50,000 alien refugees and potentially doom Earth, or turn away beings who had traveled across the galaxy seeking sanctuary. "What's the timeline on these Devourers?" she asked. "Unknown. The data suggests anywhere from months to decades. But Captain, there's something else. Their technology is incredibly advanced, centuries ahead of ours. If we can save them, they might be able to help us defend against the Devourers." Made the decision that would change human history forever. "Martinez, send a message to tell them that Earth offers sanctuary. Dr. Hawthorne, I need you to start working on communication protocols, real-time translation, and get me every expert we have on xenobiology, advanced physics, and military strategy." As her crew jumped into action, stared out at the stars, and wondered if she had just saved two species or doomed them both. The alien ship was still days away, but already everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they were about to discover that the cosmos was far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The next 72 hours would test every assumption humanity had made about their place in the galaxy. But as watched the alien signal growing stronger on their screens, she felt something unexpected. Hope. For the first time in human history, they had the chance to prove that Earth's children could stand among the stars not as conquerors, but as saviors. The SOS had changed everything, and there was no turning back. The SOS that changed everything, the arrival. The ship materialized out of hyperspace like a mountain appearing in Earth's orbit. Dr. James, director of the Lunar Observatory, had to recalibrate his instruments 3 times before he could believe the readings. The vessel measured over 20 kilometers in length, its hull a flowing work of art that seemed to shift and shimmer in the pale sunlight. "My God," he whispered into his communicator. "Earth Control, are you seeing this?" Admiral Harrison's voice crackled back from the surface. "We see it, Doctor. What's your assessment?" Worked frantically at his controls, trying to make sense of the readings. "Admiral, this thing is incredible. The hull appears to be some kind of adaptive metamaterial. It's actually repairing itself as we watch. But the damage. There are sections that look like they've been torn away by something massive." Aboard the International Space Station, Commander watched through the observation dome as the alien vessel settled into a stable orbit. Her crew of 12 had been preparing for this moment since receiving word of the first contact, but nothing could have prepared them for the reality of seeing an alien civilization's technology firsthand. "The engineering alone," she murmured to her second-in-command, "Doctor, look at those energy signatures. They're using power generation systems we can't even begin to understand." Nodded, his face pressed against the reinforced glass. "But look at the dark sections, Commander. Whatever attacked them, it did serious damage. I'm reading massive hull breaches, failed power grids, and what looks like organic contamination." Before could respond, their communication system came alive with an incoming transmission. The voice that emerged was hauntingly beautiful, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, but the translation overlay made its meaning clear. Earth vessel, this is Ra of the refugee ship Wandering Hope. We thank you for your sanctuary offer. Our people are dying, and our ship fails more each moment. We request immediate assistance with medical evacuation and life support repair. Grab the communicator. Ra, this is Commander of the International Space Station. We're prepared to offer whatever assistance we can, but our capabilities may be limited compared to your technology. What do you need most urgently? The response came quickly, accompanied by a data stream that made their computers work overtime to process. Commander, we have approximately 8,000 individuals in critical condition. Our atmospheric processors have been contaminated, and our medical facilities are overwhelmed. Additionally, we carry children, nearly 12,000 young ones who cannot survive much longer in these conditions. The weight of 12,000 alien children's lives settled on shoulders. She looked at her small crew and realized they were facing the greatest humanitarian crisis in human history, and they were completely unprepared for it. Doctor, get on the comm to Earth Control. We need every medical transport, every environmental suit, and every xenobiology expert they can launch within the next 12 hours. Commander, start preparing the station for emergency expansion protocols. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, the news of alien contact had sent shockwaves through every government and organization on the planet. President Torres stood in the Situation Room, surrounded by advisors, scientists, and military leaders, all trying to process the impossible situation. Madam President, said Dr. Sarah, director of the CDC, we have no idea what kind of biological contamination risks we're facing. These beings could carry pathogens that could wipe out life on Earth, or vice versa. We need strict quarantine protocols. General Chairman of the Joint Chiefs leaned forward. Ma'am, we also need to consider the security implications. This could be an elaborate invasion strategy. 50,000 aliens claiming to be refugees could easily overwhelm our defenses once they're inside our orbital space. President Torres looked tired but determined. General, Doctor, I understand your concerns, but we're talking about children dying in space. 12,000 of them. If we turn our backs on refugees, regardless of their species, we're not the humanity I want to represent to the galaxy. Dr. NASA's administrator pulled up a holographic display showing the alien vessel. Madam President, their technology is centuries ahead of ours. If they wanted to invade, they wouldn't need to trick us. But there's something else. Their data indicates that whatever drove them from there is still out there, possibly following them. The Devourers, Torres said grimly. They had all read the preliminary intelligence reports. How long do we have? Unknown, ma'am. Could be months, could be years. But if we help, though, we gain potential allies with advanced technology. If we don't, we still face the same threat, but alone. Torres made her decision. Launch Operation Extended Hand. I want every available resource dedicated to humanitarian aid for these refugees. Doctor, work with their medical staff to establish safe quarantine and treatment protocols. General, prepare defensive positions, but make it clear to everyone that these beings are our guests, not our prisoners. Back in orbit, the first human rescue mission was about to begin. Captain Wei piloted the modified shuttle Harmony toward the massive alien vessel, his heart pounding as he approached what looked like a docking bay large enough to hold a city block. His passenger, Dr. Maria Santos, checked her environmental suit readings for the 10th time. As Earth's leading expert on xenobiology, a field that had been purely theoretical until 3 days ago, she was about to make the most important house call in human history. Captain, I'm reading massive energy fluctuations from their ship, she reported. Whatever is powering that vessel is incredibly advanced, but it's also unstable. We may be looking at a complete power failure within days. Guided the shuttle through the alien ship's energy barrier, feeling their small craft vibrate as unfamiliar forces washed over them. What they found inside took their breath away. The docking bay was filled with tall, graceful beings with elongated limbs and skin that seemed to shift between blue and silver. Their faces were angular but expressive, and their large eyes held an intelligence and sadness that transcended species barriers. But what struck the humans most was the obvious desperation of their situation. Makeshift medical tents filled the space, and the air itself seemed thick with distress. Wounded lay on improvised stretchers while others worked frantically with failing equipment. Approached their shuttle as they disembarked, clearly a leader by the deference shown by others. When he spoke, the translation device rendered his words in accented but clear English. I am Ra. You are the first solid ground my people have felt in 3 years of running. We are grateful beyond words for your courage in welcoming us. Dr. Santos stepped forward, her medical scanner already working to understand physiology. I'm Dr. Santos. We're here to help, but I need to understand your biology and medical needs. Can your people safely interact with humans? Ra's expression, somehow readable despite the alien features, showed relief. Our species share more biology than you might expect. We both evolved from carbon-based life in similar environments. But our children, his voice broke. They are dying from exposure to the contamination that followed us from our. Santos's scanner completed its preliminary analysis, and the results amazed her. Despite their obvious physical differences, biology was remarkably compatible with Earth-based life. More importantly, the contamination Ra mentioned appeared to be some kind of nanotechnological infection that was slowly poisoning their ship's atmosphere. We can help, she said firmly, but we'll need to evacuate your most critical cases immediately. How many can you transport? As many as you can take, Ra replied. Our ship, it is dying just as we are. Soon it will no longer support life. Captain had been monitoring ship communications and suddenly looked up with alarm. Doctor, I'm getting reports from Earth Control. They're detecting massive energy signatures approaching from deep space. Multiple contacts moving fast. Ra's skin shifted to a deep, dark blue, clearly a sign of distress. They have found us. The Devourers move faster than we had hoped. Earth has perhaps weeks before they arrive. The rescue mission had suddenly become a race against time. Not only did they need to save 50,000 refugees, but they had to prepare Earth for an enemy that had already destroyed one civilization. Dr. Santos looked around the massive ship, seeing both the desperation of the refugees and the incredible technology that might be humanity's only hope of survival. We're going to need more than a rescue mission. We're going to need an alliance. Ra nodded gravely. If your people can save ours, we will share everything we know about both survival and war. Together, perhaps both our species can find a way to stop the darkness that devours worlds. As alarms began sounding throughout both ships, signaling the beginning of the largest evacuation in human history, everyone involved understood that they were no longer just rescuing refugees. They were forging the first interstellar alliance, and the fate of 2 civilizations hung in the balance. The SOS that changed everything: integration and discovery. 3 weeks after the first shuttles landed on Earth, Dr. Maria Santos stood in what had once been the Denver Convention Center, now transformed into the largest research facility in human history. Around her, human and scientists worked side by side, their collaboration producing breakthroughs that would have taken humanity centuries to achieve alone. The integration hadn't been easy. Despite biological compatibility, cultural differences created constant challenges. Communicated partially through skin color changes that humans couldn't replicate, while humans relied heavily on facial expressions that found difficult to interpret. Dr. Santos called Dr. Cooper, her human colleague who had been working with metallurgist for the past week. You need to see this immediately. Santos approached their workstation where a piece of hull material sat under intense analysis. The metal, if it could still be called metal, seemed to flow and reshape itself even as they watched. Has been explaining their adaptive materials, Cooper said, his voice filled with excitement. This isn't just self-repairing armor, it's programmable matter that can restructure itself at the molecular level based on environmental threats. Skin shifted to a pleased golden hue as he spoke through the translation device. Your species has impressive intuition for engineering principles. Dr. Cooper grasped in minutes what takes our young ones years to understand. But Santos noticed the darker blue patches that occasionally flickered across skin, signs of worry she had learned to recognize. What concerns you? The material you see here requires specific rare elements to maintain its properties, he replied. Elements that exist in our system, but we have detected only trace amounts in your solar system. Without these materials, we cannot repair our ship or maintain our defensive capabilities. Santos felt her heart sink. The ship Wandering Hope was still in orbit, housing 30,000 refugees who couldn't yet be evacuated. If they lost the ship, those people would die. What about synthetic alternatives? Cooper asked. Could we create artificial substitutes? Perhaps, replied, but it would require manufacturing capabilities beyond what either of our species currently possesses individually. However, combining your industrial capacity with our material sciences. Before he could finish, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Santos grabbed her communicator as reports flooded in from monitoring stations across the solar system. Admiral Harrison's voice came through clearly. All personnel, we have multiple contacts approaching from the outer system. The Devourers have arrived, 18 days ahead of our most optimistic projections. The facility erupted into controlled chaos as humans and alike prepared for humanity's first interstellar war. But Santos noticed something remarkable. Despite the panic, the two species were working together with an efficiency that suggested weeks of shared experience rather than days. On Luna Base, Commander Sarah watched the tactical displays with growing dread. The Devourer fleet consisted of 12 massive vessels, each one larger than anything in human or experience. But what made them truly terrifying wasn't their size, it was their behavior. They're not heading directly for Earth, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant. They're spreading out, taking positions around the entire solar system. Ra, who had been working with Earth's military leaders since the evacuation began, studied the enemy formations with the experience of someone who had fought these creatures before. This is their standard consumption pattern, he explained, his skin dark with remembered fear. They encircle the system, then begin harvesting resources systematically. Asteroids, moons, planets, everything becomes fuel for their expansion. Looked at the fleet dispositions on her screen. Earth's combined military forces seemed pathetic compared to the alien threat. How long do we have? Based on their previous attacks, perhaps 2 weeks before they begin active harvesting. But there's something different about their approach this time. Ra's large eyes focused intently on the displays. What do you mean? They're not using the same energy signatures your people described. These readings suggest they've evolved since your encounter with them. The implications hit everyone in the room simultaneously. The Devourers weren't just following they were learning from each encounter, becoming more efficient at their terrible purpose. Meanwhile, in Earth's orbital shipyards, the greatest construction project in human history was taking place. Engineer worked alongside shipwright Ara, combining human industrial capacity with alien knowledge to create something neither species had attempted before. The fusion is holding, Ara reported, her skin cycling through various shades of concentration. Your construction methods are crude but effective. Our guidance systems integrated with your manufacturing speed could produce defensive platforms in days rather than months. Wiped sweat from her forehead as she watched human and workers installing adaptive armor plating on what would become Earth's first interstellar defense platform. Ara, will it be enough? We're building as fast as we can, but 12 of those things. Alone, neither our technologies nor yours would be sufficient, Ara replied honestly. But together, we create something new, something the Devourers have not encountered before. The truth of that statement became clear when the first joint human prototype fighter emerged from the construction bay. The small craft combined human missile technology with energy shielding, creating a hybrid that outperformed anything either species could build separately. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Doctor, a theoretical physicist from the University of Lagos, had been working with scientists on understanding Devourer technology from the data the refugees had brought. They're not just machines, she announced during an emergency briefing to world leaders. The Devourers are a hybrid of biological and artificial intelligence. They consume civilizations not just for resources, but for knowledge and genetic material. President Torres leaned forward intently. What does that mean for our defense? It means they adapt to whatever they consume, explained, his normally calm demeanor showing cracks of fear. Each species they destroy makes them stronger and more diverse in their capabilities. But it also means they have weaknesses, Doctor continued. Their hybrid nature makes them vulnerable to specific types of interference, combinations of electromagnetic and biological warfare that neither purely organic nor purely mechanical enemies could exploit. The room buzzed with new hope as the implications sank in. Humanity and the might have found the key to fighting an enemy that had seemed invincible. Generals spoke up from the tactical station. What do you need to implement this? Time, resources, and perfect coordination between our species, replied. We'll need to combine human biological warfare research with quantum disruption technology, and we'll need to deploy it before the Devourers complete their encirclement. In the days that followed, the alliance between humanity and the deepened into something that transcended mere cooperation. Human families began hosting refugees, and despite language barriers and physiological differences, bonds formed that surprised both species. 10-year-old found himself teaching basic English to a young named Ra, whose skin color changes helped understand emotions in ways he had never experienced with other humans. Meanwhile, Ra's advanced mathematical concepts helped grasp principles that would have been impossible for a human child to learn alone. Similar scenes played out around the world as two civilizations discovered that their differences made them stronger together. Meditation techniques helped human soldiers manage combat stress, while human music provided with emotional outlets their culture had never developed. But beneath the remarkable cooperation, everyone understood the stakes. The Devourers were closing their formation around the solar system, and reconnaissance drones were already probing the outer planets. Soon, the Alliance would face its ultimate test. In the command center of the newly completed orbital defense platform Unity, Admiral Harrison watched the final preparations with a mixture of pride and terror. Around her, human and officers worked together with a precision that seemed impossible given their species had met less than a month ago. All defensive platforms report ready, announced Commander from her position at the tactical station. Hybrid fighters are fueled and armed. Joint fleet formations have completed their deployments. Ra approached the central command console, his skin showing the deep blue of determination mixed with golden hope. Admiral, our two peoples have accomplished in weeks what each of us might have taken years to achieve alone. Whatever happens in the coming battle, we have created something beautiful. Harrison nodded, looking out at the combined fleet, human ships with modifications fighting alongside vessels enhanced with human weaponry. It was a sight that should have been impossible, but had become their shared reality. Signal all ships, she ordered. This is Admiral Harrison to the combined Earth fleet. Today we fight not as separate species, but as one people defending our shared home. Let's show the Devourers what happens when the children of two worlds stand together. As the enemy fleet began its final approach, the Alliance prepared to prove that cooperation and hope could triumph over consumption and destruction. The SOS that had brought them together was about to be answered by the combined might of two civilizations that had chosen to face the darkness. The SOS that changed everything, the battle for two worlds. The first Devourer probe ship entered Earth's orbital space at 800 hours Greenwich Mean Time, and immediately everything humanity thought they knew about space combat became obsolete. The vessel, a writhing mass of mechanical and biological components that seemed to shift between solid matter and energy, simply absorbed the initial barrage of human missiles without any apparent damage. Captain Lisa Park, commanding the hybrid cruiser New Harmony, watched her weapons readings with disbelief. Command, this is New Harmony. Conventional weapons are completely ineffective. The target appears to be absorbing our kinetic and explosive attacks. From the bridge of the battleship Star's Edge, and responded with the calm of someone who had faced this enemy before. Captain Park, switch to the hybrid disruption weaponry. The Devourers cannot adapt to technologies they have never encountered. Park's weapons officer, Lieutenant Sarah, activated the new systems that combined human electromagnetic pulse technology with quantum disruption fields. The beam that lanced out from New Harmony was unlike anything that had existed before the Alliance, a weapon that attacked both the mechanical and biological components of the enemy simultaneously. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The Devourer probe ship convulsed, its shape becoming unstable as the hybrid weapon disrupted the fundamental forces that held its dual nature together. Within seconds, it collapsed into constituent particles that dispersed harmlessly into space. Direct hit, target destroyed, announced, her voice filled with amazement. The hybrid weapon systems are working exactly as designed. But their celebration was short-lived. Admiral Harrison's voice came through the fleet communication system with urgent authority. All ships, we have multiple contacts emerging from hyperspace. The main Devourer fleet is arriving ahead of schedule. On the command deck of Orbital Station Unity, Doctor worked frantically with her counterpart, monitoring the energy signatures of the arriving enemy fleet. What they discovered made them both pale with fear. Admiral called out, "The main Devourer fleet isn't just larger than we expected, they're different. They've incorporated technology that matches both human and signatures." Harrison turned from the tactical display, her face grim. "What does that mean?" Skin had shifted to the deep purple that indicated severe distress among his people. "It means they've been studying us since they began pursuing our refugee fleet. They've already begun adapting to our combined technologies." The implications hit the command staff like a physical blow. The Devourers weren't just following they had been learning from every engagement, preparing specifically for this confrontation. "How long before they complete adaptation to our hybrid weapons?" Harrison asked. "Unknown," replied, "but based on their previous patterns, we may have hours rather than days before our technological advantage disappears." The main battle began when the Devourer fleet split into 3 formation groups, each targeting a different aspect of the solar system's defenses. The first group moved directly toward Earth and its orbital platforms, while the second began harvesting operations on the outer planets. The third, most ominously, positioned itself between the Alliance fleet and potential escape routes. Commander, now commanding the asteroid defense platforms in the belt between Mars and Jupiter, coordinated with engineers who had modified the installations with their adaptive technologies. "All platforms, initiate synchronized firing pattern Delta. Let's see how these things handle a coordinated quantum disruption field." The asteroid belt platforms fired simultaneously, creating a web of hybrid energy that caught the advancing Devourers in a coordinated assault. For a moment, it seemed as if the strategy might work. Several enemy vessels showed signs of distress, their shape-shifting hulls becoming unstable under the quantum assault. But then something terrifying happened. Instead of being destroyed, the affected Devourer ships began to merge with each other, combining their damaged components to create larger, more complex entities. Within minutes, 5 damaged enemy vessels had become 2 much larger and apparently stronger ones. "They're not just adapting," reported with growing alarm. "They're evolving in real time, using damage as an opportunity to become more efficient." The tide of battle began to turn against the Alliance. Every successful attack seemed only to make the Devourers stronger, while their return fire demonstrated an increasing understanding of both human and defensive systems. But in the medical stations of Earth's surface, something remarkable was happening that would change the course of the battle. Dr. Maria Santos had been working with Healer to treat wounded personnel from both species, when she noticed something extraordinary in their shared medical data. She called excitedly, "Look at these biological compatibility readings. Human and immune systems don't just coexist. They actually complement each other in ways that create hybrid resistances neither species possesses alone." Skin shifted to the bright yellow of intense interest. "Dr. Santos, are you suggesting that our biological integration could create advantages beyond our technological cooperation?" "More than that," Santos replied, her mind racing with possibilities. "If the Devourers consume biological as well as technological information, they might not be able to process biological systems that exist in cooperation rather than competition." The breakthrough came when Santos analyzed blood samples from humans and who had been working closely together for weeks. The samples showed biological markers that suggested the beginning of symbiotic adaptation. The 2 species were literally beginning to complement each other at a genetic level. "This is incredible," Santos breathed. "We're not just allies, we're beginning to become something new, something that might be immune to Devourer absorption because it exists only in cooperation between species." Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the battle was reaching a critical point. The combined fleet had been driven back to Earth's immediate orbital space, and Devourer harvesting operations were already stripping resources from the outer planets with terrifying efficiency. Captain Park's New Harmony had taken significant damage, but her hybrid crew of humans had managed to keep the ship operational through sheer determination and cross-species cooperation. Her navigator, L, worked alongside human engineer to reroute power through systems that shouldn't have been compatible but somehow functioned perfectly. "Captain," called out, "we're getting some kind of transmission from Earth. It's not standard military communications, it's coming from the medical research facilities. Dr. Santos's voice came through clearly despite the battle static. All fleet personnel, this is Dr. Santos with critical tactical information. We've discovered that close cooperation between human and personnel creates biological markers that may be resistant to devourer absorption protocols. Park looked around her bridge, where human and officers had been working together so closely that they seemed to anticipate each other's actions. What does that mean for the fleet? It means, Santos continued, that ships with fully integrated crews may be able to approach devourer vessels without triggering their adaptive defenses. They may not recognize cooperative biological systems as targets for absorption. The idea was insane, but it was also their only hope. Admiral Harrison made the decision that would define the battle. All ships with integrated crews prepare for close quarters engagement. We're going to test Dr. Santos's theory with everything we have. The New Harmony, along with 5 other ships that had achieved true human integration, broke from the main defensive formation and accelerated directly toward the largest devourer vessel. As they approached, something remarkable happened. The enemy ship's defensive systems seemed confused, unable to lock onto targets that registered as both cooperative and competitive, biological and technological. "It's working," Park announced. "They can't get a targeting lock on us. Their systems are trying to process cooperative consciousness, and it's creating processing conflicts." The integrated ships reached point-blank range and unleashed everything they had. But instead of using the hybrid disruption weapons, they employed something even more devastating: coordinated attacks that required perfect synchronization between human intuition and mathematical precision. The effect on the Devourer ship was immediate and catastrophic. Its hybrid biological-mechanical systems, designed to absorb and adapt to conquered technologies, simply couldn't process the concept of willing cooperation between species. The enemy vessel began to break apart as its core absorption protocols failed. "All ships," Admiral Harrison broadcast across the fleet, "implement Integration Protocol 7. Human and crews work together not just as allies, but as one people. Let's show these machines what happens when life chooses cooperation over consumption." What followed was the most beautiful and deadly dance in the history of space combat. Human pilots flying with instincts, engineers thinking with human creativity, and weapons systems that represented the perfect marriage of 2 civilizations' greatest strengths. One by one, the Devourer ships found themselves unable to adapt to an enemy that didn't function on the principles of competition and dominance that their creators had built into them. The machines that had consumed a dozen civilizations were being defeated by the simple but revolutionary concept of true partnership between different forms of life. As the last Devourer vessel broke apart in Earth's orbit, Admiral Harrison looked around the command center where humans and worked side by side, no longer as separate species, but as something entirely new. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "The battle is won, but more importantly, the war has shown us what we can become when we choose cooperation over conquest." The SOS that had brought them to Earth had indeed changed everything, but not in the way anyone had expected. It had created the first true interstellar civilization, bound not by dominance but by mutual support and shared hope for the future. The SOS that changed everything, a new dawn among the stars. 6 months after the Battle of Earth, Dr. Maria Santos stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed orbital habitat New Horizons, watching children play in the zero-gravity recreation area below. Human and youngsters moved together with a grace that seemed impossible, their games involving concepts that neither species could have understood alone. The sight filled her with wonder. These children, growing up together in the orbital stations that now dotted Earth's space, were becoming something entirely new, a generation that thought naturally in terms of cooperation between species. "Dr. Santos," called her research partner, approaching with the flowing movement that characterized her people. Her skin showed the warm, golden hues that had become familiar to Santos as indicating contentment. "The latest integration studies are remarkable. The children show cognitive patterns that exceed both human and baselines." Santos nodded, reviewing the data on her tablet. The young people weren't just learning to cooperate. They were developing hybrid thinking patterns that combined human intuitive leaps with mathematical precision. It's as if we're watching the birth of a new form of intelligence, one that exists in the space between our species rather than within either one. The transformation hadn't been limited to the children. Across the solar system, humans were working together to rebuild and expand their shared civilization. The asteroid belt had become a massive construction zone where hybrid technologies created habitats and industries that neither species could have imagined alone. Admiral Harrison, now director of the Joint Colonial Administration, reviewed reports from across the system with satisfaction. Mars was being terraformed using atmospheric processors enhanced with human biological engineering. The moons of Jupiter had become research stations where scientists from both species pushed the boundaries of physics and biology. But perhaps most remarkably, Earth itself had been transformed. Instead of being damaged by the war, the planet had become more beautiful as environmental technologies cleaned centuries of human pollution, while human agricultural techniques helped feed the growing integrated population. The morning briefing brought Harrison reports that would have seemed like science fiction just months before. "Admiral," announced Commander, now heading the Deep Space Exploration Division, "the first joint colony ship is ready for launch. The Star Bridge will carry 10,000 volunteers, 5,000 human, 5,000 to establish our first settlement beyond the solar system." Harrison smiled, remembering the desperate days when survival seemed impossible. Now they were preparing to spread their hybrid civilization to the stars. "What's the target system, Commander?" "HD 164,595, approximately 94 light-years from Earth. Survey data indicates 3 potentially habitable worlds, and our new hybrid faster-than-light drives will get us there in less than 2 years." The faster-than-light technology itself represented the pinnacle of human cooperation. Human theoretical physics had provided insights into dimensional folding that even advanced science hadn't considered, while engineering made those theories practically achievable. But the real breakthrough had come from an unexpected source. Now 16, and among the first generation of truly integrated human thinkers, had proposed modifications to the drive system that neither species' adult scientists had conceived. "The thing is," had explained during a presentation that left hardened engineers speechless, "you're thinking about space travel like you have to go through space. But Ra and I figured out that if you think about space like water and dimensions like currents, you don't travel through space, you surf the dimensional flows." The technology that emerged from that insight allowed nearly instantaneous travel between star systems, opening the galaxy to exploration and colonization by the hybrid civilization. In the research laboratories of New Horizons, breakthroughs continued at an unprecedented pace. Doctor, working with physicist N, had developed technologies that seemed to border on magic, matter converters that could transform any element into any other, energy storage systems that could power entire cities, and communication devices that worked instantaneously across any distance. N said during their latest experiment, his skin cycling through excited purples and golds, "Your species' approach to quantum mechanics is beautifully chaotic. You see possibilities we would never consider because they seem mathematically impossible." Laughed, watching their latest creation, a device that converted thought patterns directly into physical energy. "And your mathematical frameworks give our wild ideas actual structure. Together, we're creating things that violate both of our species' understanding of what's possible." The cultural integration proved just as remarkable as the technological advances. Human music, enhanced by harmonic mathematics, created sounds that moved listeners to tears regardless of their species. Poetry, translated through human emotional understanding, expressed feelings that touched souls across biological barriers. Perhaps most importantly, the philosophical implications of the partnership were reshaping how both species understood existence itself. The old human concepts of competition and individual achievement seemed primitive compared to the integrated approach that saw cooperation as the highest form of evolution. Dr. James, now director of the Galactic Research Institute, published papers that revolutionized philosophy throughout the known galaxy. His work with philosopher Wise Singer demonstrated that consciousness itself might be a cooperative phenomenon, that awareness required the interaction between different forms of perception. "What we've discovered," explained to the Galactic Council, now composed equally of humans, and is that intelligence isn't something that exists within individuals. but something that emerges from the cooperation between different types of minds. The implications were staggering. The hybrid civilization wasn't just more capable than either species alone. It represented a fundamentally new form of life that existed in the cooperation itself. News of their success had spread throughout the galaxy through quantum communication networks that the hybrid civilization had established. Other species, many of whom had been hiding from the devourers for generations, began reaching out to request membership in what was becoming known as the Cooperative Alliance. The crystalline beings from the Vega system arrived first. Their silicon-based consciousness complemented the carbon-based thinking of humans, and creating three-way collaborative efforts that produced technologies approaching what could only be called miraculous. Next came the flowing ones from the Procyon system, energy beings who could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their partnership with the Alliance led to the development of multi-dimensional colonies that existed in several realities at once. Each new species brought unique capabilities that enhanced the collective. But more importantly, they brought new perspectives on cooperation itself, showing that the human partnership was just the beginning of what was possible when different forms of life chose collaboration over competition. President Torres, now serving as Earth's representative to the Galactic Cooperative Council, often reflected on the decision that had started it all. "When we chose to answer that SOS," she told visiting dignitaries, "we thought we were simply offering sanctuary to refugees. We had no idea we were taking the first step toward becoming a galactic civilization." The transformation wasn't without challenges. Some members of both species struggled with the rapid changes, preferring the familiar patterns of their original cultures. But these holdouts became fewer each generation, as the obvious benefits of cooperation made isolationism seem not just inefficient, but lonely. Ra, now serving as liaison between the various species in the Alliance, often marveled at how much had changed since that desperate day when his people's dying ship had broadcast its SOS into the void. "We came seeking sanctuary," he reflected during a ceremony celebrating the launch of the 100th colony ship. "Instead, we found something we never knew existed, a way of living that makes both our species more than they could ever be alone." The ceremony took place on Earth, in a vast amphitheater that overlooked the restored oceans. Children from a dozen species played together while their parents watched with wonder. The air itself seemed to shimmer with possibilities as hybrid technologies created localized environmental conditions perfect for each species present. As the colony ship Universal Hope lifted off for its destination in the Andromeda Galaxy, yes, they were already planning intergalactic expansion. A message arrived through the quantum communication network that made everyone pause in amazement. The message came from a previously unknown species called the Gardeners, who had been observing the Alliance's development from across the galaxy. Their communication was simple but profound. "We have watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years. Most choose the path of dominance and ultimately destroy themselves. You have chosen cooperation and created something new. You have shown that consciousness itself can evolve. Welcome to the next phase of galactic existence." Dr. Santos, now elderly but still sharp, stood with her old friend watching the ship disappear into hyperspace. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had ignored your people's SOS?" Skin shifted through contemplative blues and greens. "I believe the universe would have found another way to bring us together. Cooperation isn't just a choice. It's the fundamental direction of evolution itself. We simply learned to work with that force instead of against it." As the stars began to appear in the evening sky, both women could see the lights of the orbital habitats and the gentle glow of the terraforming projects on Mars. What had once been a single world hosting one species was becoming the heart of a galactic civilization based on the radical idea that different forms of life were stronger together. The SOS that had changed everything had done more than save two species. It had demonstrated that the universe itself was calling for consciousness to evolve beyond competition toward cooperation, beyond isolation toward integration, beyond the limitations of single species toward the unlimited potential of willing partnership among all forms of life. In the end, the greatest discovery wasn't new technology or new worlds. It was the understanding that consciousness itself was meant to be shared, and that the future belonged not to the strongest or species, but to those wise enough to choose cooperation over conquest. The message had been received, answered, and transformed into something even more beautiful than its senders had dared to hope. The SOS that began with a cry for help had become a song of celebration that echoed across the galaxy, inviting all conscious beings to join the great work of building a universe where every form of life could flourish together.